I'd like to call the caucus meeting of January 5th, 2021 to order at 7:30 p.m. Present are council members Broussard, Williamson, Schuman, Heeman, Glassburn, and Kelly. Mayor, the finance director, assistant law director, director of economic and development and planning, and human resources director, and our guest this evening. On tonight's agenda, we have two pieces of legislation to consider for suspension of the rules. The first is Resolution 2020-154, which was just heard in the Finance Committee. Councilman Schuman.
Yes, we voted 3-0 to go ahead and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me here. We voted to place on suspension 2020-154 3-0, and it's something that needs to be taken care of quickly. So.
Thank you. Any objection to suspensions? Seeing none. The next piece of legislation to consider for suspension of the rules this evening is on first reading, Resolution 2021-3, resolution establishing the temporary indoor dining program and declaring an emergency, and that is Councilwoman Heeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This, well, at the last minute, as we all saw, now has a little bit of a wrench thrown into it by our building commissioner, Mr. Grusenmeyer. Just so that everyone knows, this legislation was put into the, as a request into the law department back in June. And Mr. Rowe was not available at the time to work on it. And I did work on it with Mr. O'Malley. And Mr. O'Malley at that time, you know, had a challenge understanding the role of the Cuyahoga County Board of Health as their administrative, not governing, right? So we don't have a Board of Health, but we don't need one because we, you know, the Board of Health does their job, we do our job. So we let that sit for a little while, hoping that, you know, some of these things could be worked through. And then we got busy with some other things in budget, et cetera. So the way it reads now, and just to let you know, I did work on this with Law Director Garreau, who is not present tonight. And he assured me that he did speak with Mr. O'Malley. And so, Mr. O'Malley, I will give you the opportunity to speak about this legislation. The stumbling block, although the restrooms are mentioned in Mr. Grusenmeyer's email, that was not an issue to the building department, or sorry, to the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, that the restrooms could be back at the original space, which is what the guidelines call for anyway. So I would like to, you know, have everyone disregard that portion of his email because I don't think it's relevant at all. With regard to the plans, Mr. Garreau did feel that more than likely there are plans that would be usable on file because it's a temporary situation, and that then if they were not, then we would have to pursue obviously getting plans the way that folks do now. I was in contact with Mr. Garreau this evening, and he was shocked and surprised by this response at 4 o'clock from Mr. Grusenmeyer because he had referred back to the original emails that went back and forth with Mr. Grusenmeyer, Director Lieber, and myself. Sadly, our Director Gallo was left out in June of those emails, so she doesn't have any information probably to share. So I don't think that it's an issue really. I will let Mr. O'Malley address that. Mr. O'Malley cannot address for us whether or not we'd be willing to move forward with suspension. That would be our call and not Mr. O'Malley's. But Mr. O'Malley, if you would please, help us understand what you and Mr. Garreau went over with regard to this resolution and these guidelines.
Mr. O'Malley.
Madam President, I'm not entirely sure what the councilwoman's question is. Certainly, the law director stands by the legislation that he's prepared for this council, and certainly the council can adopt this resolution under suspension tonight. There's no question about that. I don't really read the building commissioner's email as contradicting the legislation that's before council. He's making some observations, suggestions, and the building code, the Ohio Building Code, and his authority under the Ohio Building Code is, which is entirely within his purview, is going to be enforced. There's nothing in the legislation that would suggest otherwise. In fact, the legislation is quite clear that there's no intention to contradict the Ohio Building Code. So I don't really know what these issues are that the councilwoman is concerned about. I don't see any challenge for myself. I don't know that the law director was shocked, and it's only a last minute wrench if you choose to view it that way.
Councilwoman.
Thank you. I do not view it that way, Mr. O'Malley. I wanted to make sure my colleagues did not view it that way, because sometimes understanding, the building code and the intention and all of that stuff gets a little complicated because we are not experts at that. So I am in complete comfort that the legislation is properly written and will be properly executed by the Cuyahoga County Board of Health and our building department as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that my colleagues did not think that Mr. Grusenmeyer's late entry of comments were problematic.
Madam President?
Assistant Director O'Malley.
Yes, I think it's important for council to keep in mind that the Board of Health as an independent administrative body, and that nothing that the council is undertaking in terms of guidelines or zoning legislation to try and assist with this temporary space is intended to direct, legislate for, or otherwise establish guidelines for the Board of Health. They will take care of those things on their own. But as I expressed to Councilwoman Heeman in June, and I'll do so again tonight, that she's done a great job to try and roll out the red carpet for this venture by communicating with the Board of Health in hopes that this temporary space legislation would come out smoothly and be utilized by our business community. I, for one, would like to go out to eat in the new year. And if it's in a restaurant or in a vacant space, in either case, I still want to go out to dinner.
Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Heeman.
Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. I appreciate that. I too would like to go out to eat, and I think that our residents and restaurants need that as well. So that would be, I think, public health and safety. My colleagues in council are clear. The portion that was applies to the Cuyahoga County Board of Health was actually done by the Cuyahoga County Board of Health and signed off on by all of their director levels and their general counsel. The guidelines were gone over again when I began working. So they were drafted originally in June, and then I submitted them again right before this all came to finalization, because Director Gros and I wanted to make sure that they still were in agreement with all of those guidelines and did not want to change anything. And the reality is I left a voicemail for Mr. Armstrong, who's the director over the restaurant portion of the Board of Health. And in 25 minutes, he had an email to all of his folks saying that, we want to help our restaurants. And within 30 minutes, I had an answer signed off on by all of the director levels at the Board of Health with comments. They tweaked a few things because it's been a few months. And then Director Gros then went ahead and approved those comments. And obviously they're public record, if anyone would like to see that, all those email exchanges, you can, but Director Gros has all of them from June and currently. So I hope that we can help our businesses. This is just something that I would like to see pass on suspension and help our businesses right away. I think it's important for our community to give them every tool we can. Thank you, Madam Floor, and I'll yield. Madam President, I'll yield the floor.
Questions from council. Councilman Broussard.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Councilwoman Heeman. So listen, I absolutely support helping the restaurant industry in North Olmsted. That goes without saying, especially since many of them reside in Ward 1. But I checked with the administration earlier today, and according to them, as of yet, we have had no inquiries or requests for indoor dining expansion. And the information that we did receive this afternoon from Building Commissioner Grusenmeyer, now we're being asked to disregard that when he is to be considered one of our administrative experts on these subjects. This is exactly the reason why we should be vetting this in committee, because we've got a big difference of opinion between the author and our building commissioner. So I'm not in favor of suspension. I think it should be vetted in the committee process. Thank you.
Councilwoman Heeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Broussard, I understand that businesses have not, come beating down our door. They're trying to find their way to just even run their business. And I would expect that as the leaders in our community, that is our job to figure out how best to help them, particularly in a pandemic and a crisis. I think that it's tough enough to own a business if you've ever done it. I have. Keeps you up at night, how to pay the employees, where to find the next run of business, where to find your, all the money coming in. So I think that it is our job to think through some of these things and help them. And so I, respectfully disagree with you that we shouldn't be waiting for businesses, or that they didn't express a big enough interest. I don't think they even know what could be available to them. This is a little outside the box. So I'm not sure that any business would have expected that, the marriage of the building code and then the Board of Health code could be put together in such a way that could be extremely beneficial to them on a temporary basis. And, if you don't want to vote, then you don't have to. You can vote no to not help businesses. I don't know what to tell you. This has been vetted by our law director. I encouraged you when I left a voicemail that you should inquire of our law director. And I don't know that you did or did not do that, but this email from our, commissioner didn't come until 4 o'clock this evening, even though he looked at this 6 months ago, and Law Director Gros reviewed those emails from 6 months ago and said this was not a problem. So I still don't think it is. And
I have Councilman Glassburn and then Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm I'm aware of the timeline of this because I was thinking along the same road as Councilwoman Heeman, and we divvied up tasks, and this is something she worked on. This has been known by the building commissioner and the law department and the administration, for that matter, for months and months. The time for this is between now and roughly the end of March, April, when the weather is the coldest, when we're going to have the absolute worst of the pandemic. So if we're going to help people, now's the time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Council President Jones. I also agree that we need to do what we can to help our businesses. And I'd like to thank Councilwoman Heeman for the hard work she did getting this set up like this. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Clerk Massarillo.
Council President, I'm sorry, I meant to do this after you asked for the first piece of legislation for suspension. Councilman Limpert reached out to me today when he was telling me he wasn't going to be able to make it to the meeting tonight, and he wanted me to let all of council know he has no objection to suspension on any of the items that were proposed on the suspension list tonight.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council at this time on resolution 2021-3? Okay, thank you. And I hear one objection to suspension. That vote will be held on the floor of our council meeting this evening. Moving into scheduling committee meetings. On first reading, resolution 2021-1 will go into finance, and ordinance 2021-2 will go into BZD. And scheduling for committee meetings next week. Just a reminder to council that next Tuesday on January 12th, we do have a public hearing scheduled for 7 p.m. And so being mindful of that meeting and also mindful that it would be, I think as long as Chairwoman Williamson is in agreement with this, that the BZD meeting should follow the public hearing. Then I would ask that perhaps Chairman Schuman of Finance would be willing, if you think you would have enough time, to have your committee meeting at perhaps 6:45 that evening.
That's no problem. That's no problem at all. I don't
Okay.
think this is going to take very long. We could probably do it at 6:55.
Okay, I mean, I'm comfortable if you are, Mr. Chairman, actually 6:50. I just want to make sure that we are starting our public hearing right at 7 as we're.
That's fine. We'll call it 6:50. I mean, it's an acceptance of a donation, so I can't imagine there'll be much rejection of it.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll schedule finance for 6:50 p.m. And the public hearing, I'm anticipating approximately 10 minutes. So that meeting will go from 7 until 7:10. And so Chairwoman Williamson of BZD then, if 7:10 is acceptable to you, to start your committee meeting.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And I don't believe, unless a council person needs to let me know right now, I don't believe that we will have anything else on the agenda at this point for Tuesday then.
Madam President,
Yes,
I would like to bring back, since we are going to be discussing the 2021-45, I'd also like to bring back 2020-77, which is the chicken coop legislation. I think that a discussion that evening will probably work out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And council members, is there anything else, any announcements or anything for the good of the order? Mayor, is there anything else for council?
Madam President?
Yes, Councilman Sheehan.
You said you were going to have a council meeting of the whole. You plan on doing that the following week then?
So, Councilman, if council receives the answers to the questions that we had put forth, the 12th could be a possibility. We could follow the scheduled BZD meeting, or we might have to have that meeting perhaps on the 19th before our council meeting. I'm just not sure when we're going to get, those answers, and so I hesitate to put a meeting on the agenda before.
Okay, well, everybody needs to keep in mind that we'll have to have a finance committee meeting to get this back on the agenda, the 158 back on the agenda. So, thank you.
Yes. Yep. Thank you. Absolutely. We'll make sure that those two issues are handled then together.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Well, with that, we will conclude our caucus meeting at 7:52 p.m. and we will see everyone in a few minutes at 8 p.m.